I worked at a Trump hotel and saw what I wasn't supposed to. I always thought hotels were just hotels. A place to sleep, a place to eat, a place where rich people spent too much money on things that didn't matter. But after working at one of the Trump hotels, I realized something. Some places aren't just for sleeping. Some places aren't meant to be found. I needed money. Badly. Rent was overdue. My credit card was maxed out, and I was one unexpected bill away from losing everything. So when I landed a job at one of the Trump hotels, I didn't think twice. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough. The hiring process was weirdly easy. No background check, barely an interview, just a quick conversation and an offer that seemed too good to be true. I had no experience in hospitality, no references, but I was hired on the spot. They told me the rules were simple. Do my job. Stay out of restricted areas. Don't ask questions. Rich people love their privacy, I figured. So I kept my head down and worked. Until the night I made a mistake. I was delivering a bottle of wine to a guest on the 10th floor. It was late, the hallway was empty, and I was exhausted. As I turned to head back toward the service elevator, I noticed something strange at the end of the hallway, another elevator. I had never seen it before. It wasn't on any of the maps they gave us. It had no floor directory, no sign above it, just a polished brass door with a single call button. I wasn't planning to press it. But as I walked past, the doors slid open. Inside, there were only two buttons. L for lobby, and 11. The hotel only had 10 floors. I stood there for a moment, confused. Before I could step back, the doors shut. Then the elevator started moving. When it stopped, the doors opened to a hallway that looked just like every other floor in the hotel. Same expensive carpet, same golden accents. But something felt off. The air was stale, like the ventilation hadn't been working for years. And then I noticed something else. There were no room numbers. The doors lining the hall were identical, plain, black, featureless. No peepholes. No placards. Just rows of doors stretching down both sides of the corridor. I should have left, but I stepped forward. One step, then another. Then, without warning, one of the doors opened. A man in a suit stepped out. Not a guest. Not staff. His eyes locked onto mine, and in that instant, I knew. I wasn't supposed to be here. Who let you up here? His voice was calm, controlled. I started to say something, an excuse, an apology, anything, but he didn't blink. His hand moved toward his jacket. I turned and ran. I slammed the elevator button over and over, my heart pounding. Footsteps behind me. The doors slid open, and I threw myself inside. Just before they shut, I saw more men stepping into the hallway. All in suits. All looking directly at me, like they had been waiting for me to arrive. The elevator doors closed. And I knew, without a doubt, this wasn't over. Not even close. I stumbled out of the elevator onto the 10th floor, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. The hallway was empty, silent except for the soft hum of the hotel's air system. I half expected the men in suits to come storming down after me, but the doors behind me remained closed. For a second, I thought I was safe. I forced myself to take a deep breath and straighten my uniform. Act normal. Walk, don't run. I hurried toward the service elevator, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. There was no 11th floor. At least, not one that was supposed to exist. The building plans I'd seen during training had only 10. And those doors, no numbers, no signs. What the hell was up there? I was halfway down the hall when my radio crackled. Night staff, check in. My stomach dropped. I hesitated before pressing the button. Yeah, I'm here, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Silence. Then, come to the manager's office. They knew. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my hands as I walked toward the staff area. Maybe this was a coincidence. Maybe they just needed me to cover a shift or something. But I knew better. When I reached the office, the door was already open. My manager, Richard, sat behind his desk. He wasn't looking at his computer, wasn't even pretending to do paperwork. He was just sitting there, waiting for me. Close the door, he said. I hesitated. I said, close the door. I did. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Just stared at me like he was deciding how much of a problem I was. Then he leaned forward. Tell me exactly where you were just now. I could have lied. Should have. But my brain wasn't working fast enough, and my mouth opened before I could stop it. I was on the 10th floor. He exhaled through his nose. A slight shake of his head. Try again. I gripped the edge of my uniform, fingers twisting the fabric. My heart was hammering. I could deny it. Say I didn't know what he was talking about. But there was no way he would have called me in here unless they already knew. Maybe they had cameras. Maybe one of the men up there had already reported me. I took the wrong elevator, I said finally. I didn't mean to go up there. I didn't even know there was an 11th floor. He didn't react. Didn't even blink. What did you see? I hesitated. What was the right answer? Did I say nothing? Pretend I got scared and ran before I saw anything important? I opened my mouth to respond, but he held up a hand. Actually, he said, don't answer that. I froze. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a blank envelope. Set it on the desk in front of me. Your employment is terminated, he said flatly. Your severance is inside. I blinked. Wait. What? I didn't. This conversation is over. Something about his tone told me arguing wouldn't help. I reached forward, picking up the envelope. It was thick. Heavier than it should have been. Go home, Richard said. And if I were you, I wouldn't talk about this. That was it. No escort out. No threats. Just a calm, quiet warning. I walked out of the office, dazed, heart still pounding in my chest. By the time I reached the lobby, the envelope felt like a brick in my hands. I stepped outside into the night air, letting the cool wind hit my face, trying to shake the feeling that something was watching me. I opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of $100 bills and a single piece of paper. No company letterhead. No signature. Just 3 typed words. Forget the 11th. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't just severance. This was hush money. I looked back at the hotel, golden lights glowing against the night sky. I had a choice. I could take the money, walk away, or I could start asking questions. But I already knew. If I did, I wouldn't like the answers. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the envelope sitting on my nightstand like a bomb waiting to go off. The bills were crisp, freshly printed. More money than I'd ever held in my hands at once. But I couldn't stop thinking about the 3 words on that piece of paper. Forget the 11th. I should have listened. I should have shoved the envelope in a drawer, ignored the pit in my stomach, and moved on with my life. But my curiosity wouldn't let me. What the hell was on that floor? And why did they care so much about making sure I never asked? I grabbed my laptop and started searching. Nothing. No blueprints, no guest records, no archived news articles. As far as the internet was concerned, the Trump Hotel in my city had exactly 10 floors. The only reference to an 11th floor was in old construction permits from when the building was first designed. But somewhere along the way, that information just disappeared. Like it never existed. Like someone erased it. The deeper I looked, the more I felt like I was being watched. Not in my apartment, at least, I didn't think so. But online. My internet started lagging. Pages wouldn't load. Twice, my laptop froze and restarted on its own. And then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., my phone buzzed. A blocked number. I hesitated before answering. Static at first. Then, you're making a mistake. A man's voice. Flat. Emotionless. My blood ran cold. Who is this? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. A long pause. Then, forget the 11th. The call disconnected. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. I had only started looking an hour ago, and someone already knew. I shut my laptop, shoved my phone under my pillow, and lay in the dark, my pulse hammering. I told myself I would stop, that I would take the money, shut up, and move on. But I didn't believe it, because now I needed to know. And that meant one thing. I had to go back to the hotel. I didn't go back the next day, or the day after that. I told myself I was done, that I had gotten too close to something I wasn't supposed to see, and now I had been warned twice. The money was still sitting in the envelope on my nightstand. I hadn't touched it. Every time I looked at it, my stomach twisted. It wasn't just money. It was hush money. And the fact that they were willing to pay me meant that whatever was on the 11th floor was worth a hell of a lot more. I tried to go about my normal life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not in an obvious way. Just small things. A black car parked across the street from my apartment for 3 nights in a row. A man in a suit sitting alone in a cafe near my building, staring at his phone but never actually using it. A glitch on my laptop, my screen freezing just long enough for me to wonder if someone was inside my system. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe I was imagining it. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. They hadn't forgotten about me. And that meant I had a choice to make. I could keep running. Pretend I never saw anything. Take the money and disappear. Or I could go back. Find out what they didn't want me to know. and get the answers I couldn't stop thinking about. I already knew what I was going to do. I took the long way to the hotel, switching trains twice, walking through back alleys instead of main roads. If someone was following me, I wanted to know. But if they were better at hiding than I was at spotting them. By the time I reached the hotel, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear my own footsteps. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not just because I had been fired, but because they told me not to come back. I stepped into the lobby, keeping my head down. I had a plan. I wouldn't take the main elevators. That would be too obvious. Instead, I would use the service stairs, the ones I had used dozens of times while working here. They had no cameras, no keycard access, no staff monitoring them. At least, not usually. I slipped past the front desk, walking like I still worked there, like I belonged. No one stopped me. No one even looked at me. It was too easy. I reached the back hallway and pushed open the door to the stairwell. The moment it shut behind me, the silence hit me like a weight. No music. No voices. Just the faint hum of the hotel's heating system somewhere above me. I started climbing, one floor at a time. The 10th floor came faster than I expected. I stood outside the door, breathing hard, my hand resting against the cool metal. The last time I was here, I had stepped onto an elevator that shouldn't exist. Tonight, I wasn't looking for an elevator. I was looking for the stairs to the 11th floor, if they even existed. I turned and looked up, and that's when I saw it. The staircase didn't end at 10. There was another flight of stairs, leading up. I swallowed hard. I wasn't supposed to be here, but I kept going anyway, one step at a time, toward whatever they didn't want me to see. The air changed as I climbed past the 10th floor. It felt heavier, stale, like no one had been up here in a long time. The stairwell was darker than it should have been, the overhead lights dimmer, casting long shadows on the walls. I reached the landing and stopped. There was a door. It looked like every other fire exit in the building, plain metal, no markings. But something was off. There was no floor number. Every other level had a bright white sign. Floor 7, Floor 8, Floor 9. This one was blank. I pressed my hand against the door. It was cold. Too cold. For a moment, I considered turning back, taking the money, pretending none of this had ever happened. Then I remembered the way they looked at me that night. The envelope on my nightstand. The man who called me at 3:33 a.m. They wanted me to forget. And that meant I had to know why. I gritted my teeth and pushed the door open. It wasn't a hotel floor. Not really. The hallway was wrong. It was longer than it should have been, stretching farther than the length of the building. The walls weren't like the ones downstairs, no golden accents, no framed artwork. They were plain, gray, unfinished, exposed concrete instead of polished marble. No decorations, no furniture, no windows, just doors, black, unmarked, identical to the ones I had seen that night. A row of them, stretching endlessly in both directions. I stepped forward, my breath shallow, my footsteps echoing against the empty hallway. There were no cameras, no cleaning carts, no signs of hotel staff, no signs of anyone. I reached for the nearest door, hesitating before wrapping my fingers around the handle. It was warm. The air around it felt different, charged, like static electricity before a storm. I pressed my ear against the door. Silence. Then, faintly, a sound, muffled, like something shifting inside the room. A chair being dragged. Or footsteps. Someone was in there. I held my breath. Then I turned the handle, and the door unlocked. On its own. I stepped inside. The room was small. No bed. No furniture. No light except for a single fluorescent panel buzzing in the ceiling. And in the center of the room, a chair. Just a chair. Metal, bolted to the floor. Straps on the arms and legs. Next to it, a small table. On top of it, a file. Thick. Yellowed with age. I reached for it, flipping it open. Pages of handwritten notes. Dates. Times. Locations. And then, near the bottom, a name. Donald J. Trump. My breath caught in my throat. I flipped another page. More names. Some I didn't recognize. Some I did. World leaders. CEOs. People who weren't supposed to be in a file inside an unmarked room in a hotel that shouldn't have an 11th floor. I turned another page. And then, a photo. It was blurry, grainy. But I knew what I was looking at. It was this hotel, this hallway, this exact room. And sitting in the chair, Donald Trump. A chill shot down my spine. I didn't understand. What was this place? Why was his name in here? Why was he in here? My mind raced through possibilities. A secret meeting? A hidden facility? Something worse? I didn't have time to think, because suddenly, the lights flickered, and behind me, a door slammed shut. Not the one I had entered through. One further down the hall. Someone was here, and I wasn't alone anymore. I froze. The sound echoed down the empty hallway, sharp and final. Someone else was here. I turned slowly, my heart pounding against my ribs. The door I had come through was still open, the dim glow from the stairwell spilling in. But further down the hall, another door had slammed shut. I wasn't alone anymore. I had to move. I closed the file and placed it back on the table exactly as I had found it. If someone came in here after me, I didn't want them to know I had seen anything. But it didn't matter, because I already knew too much. I stepped back into the hallway. The air was heavier now, like the oxygen had been sucked out. I glanced both ways, trying to decide whether to go back to the stairwell or see who else was here. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Coming from around the corner. Not rushing. Not searching. Like whoever was out there already knew where I was. I backed up against the wall, pressing myself into the shadows. My breath was shallow, controlled. The footsteps got closer. And then, they stopped. Right at the entrance to the hallway. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, a voice. Calm. Even. Like it had been rehearsed. You shouldn't be here. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't recognize the voice, but there was something about it. Something cold. Like he wasn't warning me. Like he was just stating a fact. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. A long pause. Then, almost casually, the voice spoke again. Are you lost? I didn't answer. I knew better than to speak. A few more seconds passed. Then the footsteps started again. Coming toward me. I didn't think. I ran. I bolted toward the stairwell, my shoes slamming against the carpet. The hallway was too long, too empty. Nowhere to hide. Nowhere to go but back the way I came. The footsteps behind me stayed steady. Not running, not chasing. Like they didn't have to. Like they knew I wasn't getting out. I reached the stairwell door and yanked it open. The moment I stepped through, the temperature dropped. The stairwell was different. Darker. Colder. Like I had just stepped into a different building entirely. The light above me flickered, buzzing faintly. I turned back. The hallway was still there. The door was still open. But there was no one standing where the voice had been. The hall was empty. Had they let me go? Had I imagined it? I didn't care. I took the stairs 3 at a time, barreling downward as fast as my legs could carry me. By the time I reached the first floor, my lungs were burning. I pushed through the exit door, stumbling into a back hallway meant for hotel staff. The smell of industrial cleaners and fresh linens hit me like a wave. Everything was normal. No alarms. No security. Like nothing had happened. Like the 11th floor didn't exist. I forced myself to keep walking, heading straight for the lobby. My legs were shaking. My hands felt numb. I needed to get out of here. I stepped out into the grand, marble-floored entrance of the hotel, expecting security, expecting something, but no one even looked at me. I had just run for my life. But to everyone else, I was just another guest. A ghost, moving through a world that didn't even know I existed. I didn't stop. I walked right out the front doors and into the night, swallowing the cold air like it was my first breath in hours. I told myself I was done, that I had made it out, that I was safe. But deep down, I knew the truth. They let me go, and that was worse. Because that meant they weren't worried about what I saw. That meant they already knew what I was going to do next. And now, I was just waiting to see what they would do about it. I didn't go straight home. I couldn't. My body was still buzzing with adrenaline, my mind racing with what I had just seen. The 11th floor, the room with the chair, the file with Trump's name on it. It all felt impossible. But it wasn't. I had been there. And whoever that voice belonged to, they had let me leave. That meant one of two things. Either I hadn't seen anything important, or they already knew how to make sure I wouldn't talk about it. I walked for blocks, head down, hands shoved deep into my jacket pockets. I needed time to think. The city felt different tonight. Quieter. The usual distant sounds of car horns and late-night conversations seemed muffled, like I had stepped into a version of the world where I wasn't supposed to exist anymore. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. For a second, I almost convinced myself that was a good sign. Then I turned the corner toward my apartment and stopped cold. A black SUV was parked across the street. Not running. Just sitting there. Waiting. I didn't go inside. Instead, I kept walking, pretending I hadn't seen it. I turned down a side street, ducking into a cafe that was still open, taking a seat near the window where I could watch. 15 minutes passed. The SUV didn't move. 20. Still there. Whoever was inside, they weren't following me. They wanted me to know they were there. A message. A reminder. I wasn't done with them. But more importantly, they weren't done with me. I pulled out my phone, hesitated, then searched for anything connected to Trump, secret floors, or hidden locations in his properties. Nothing. I tried looking up the hotel's original construction plans again, but all the links I had found earlier were gone. Just dead pages. Like they had been wiped. Like someone was cleaning up behind me. I shut my phone off and stared at my reflection in the window. I had two options. Walk away, or keep digging. I already knew what I was going to do. I needed to find someone else. Someone who had worked in the hotel before me. Someone who might know what I had just walked into. Because if I was in danger, I wasn't going to be the only one. I couldn't do this alone. If the hotel had an entire hidden floor, if they had files on high-profile figures like Donald Trump, if they were watching me even now, then I needed to find someone who had been through this before. Someone who might actually know what the hell was going on. I started searching for ex-employees. Not online. That would be useless. If they had already erased public records of the 11th floor, then they'd have no problem scrubbing staff rosters too. No, I needed to talk to someone directly. And I had one lead. His name was Daniel Cortez. He had worked security at the hotel years before I did. I remembered his name because there were rumors about why he left. One night, he just stopped showing up. No resignation. No notice. And no one ever talked about it. Like he had never existed. But I remembered. And I knew where to find him. I took another long route to make sure I wasn't being followed. When I finally reached the bar where I knew he worked now, my hands were sweating. The place was almost empty. Just a few regulars, a bored bartender cleaning glasses, and a TV playing news highlights on mute. Then I saw him. Older than I expected. Tired eyes, heavy shoulders. The look of someone who had seen too much and couldn't talk about any of it. I walked over and took a seat at the bar. He didn't look up. "You a cop?" he muttered, wiping down the counter in front of me. I shook my head. "No." "Then I don't talk to reporters." "I'm not a reporter either." That got his attention. He finally looked at me, squinting like he was trying to decide whether I was worth his time. "I used to work at the hotel," I said carefully. "Something happened. I think you might know what I'm talking about." His expression didn't change. But he did one thing that told me everything I needed to know. He glanced toward the door. Not subtly. Not like someone checking for a friend. Like someone checking for a threat. And when he turned back to me, his voice was lower. "How long ago?" he asked. 2 weeks, I said. He nodded, muttering something under his breath. Then, without another word, he grabbed a glass, filled it with whiskey, and slid it toward me. I frowned. "I didn't." "Shut up and drink," he said quietly. "Act normal. You were followed." My stomach clenched. I didn't turn around. Didn't check the door. Just stared at the drink sitting in front of me, heart pounding. "Who?" I whispered. "Black SUV outside." I nodded. Daniel exhaled through his nose. Like this confirmed something he already knew. "They're not with the hotel," he said. "Not exactly." I swallowed. "Then who are they?" He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice even more. "There are people who stay at that hotel who don't want to be known. People with power, money, influence. The kind of people who can make entire records disappear if they need to." My throat was dry. "And the 11th floor?" Daniel's jaw tightened. Then, finally, "It's not a floor," he said. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "It's a holding space." "For who?" Daniel's eyes flicked toward the entrance again, just for a second. Then he looked back at me. "For people who know too much." A chill ran down my spine. I was about to ask more when Daniel suddenly pushed back from the bar, standing up. "This conversation is over." "What?" "No, wait. I need to know." I said it's over. His voice was sharp now. "You should leave. And if you're smart, you won't come looking for me again." He turned away, walking into the back room without another word. I sat there, frozen, mind racing. What did he mean? A holding space? Who were they keeping there? Who was in charge of it? And more importantly, what happens to the people who end up there? I forced myself to stand. I had pushed as far as I could for one night. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I left a 20 on the counter, walked out into the cold night air. And stopped. The SUV was still there. And this time, the engine was running. Waiting for me. The SUV's headlights flickered on the second I stepped outside. Not a coincidence. They wanted me to know they were still there. Still watching. I kept walking. Not too fast, not too slow. Just normal. If they wanted to follow me, they would. The night air felt sharper now, every sound around me magnified. My footsteps, the distant hum of traffic, the faint rustling of wind against buildings. I resisted the urge to turn around. If they were watching, they would see my fear. If they were waiting for a reaction, they wouldn't get one. At least, that's what I told myself. Until I heard the car door open. I moved faster. Still not running, still keeping my breath steady, but my heart was hammering now. A voice behind me. Low. Calm. Get in the car. I didn't stop. Didn't acknowledge it. 2 options. 1. Run. 2. Keep walking, pretend I didn't hear, hope they don't escalate. Neither felt like a great choice. Then came the second command. More firm this time. You don't want to make this harder than it needs to be. I kept my pace, turning the next corner without breaking stride. If they were going to grab me, they would have done it already. They were trying to scare me. Or test me. Or see if I was stupid enough to listen. I chose not to. I took a long route home, stopping in a convenience store, a subway station, any public place with cameras and witnesses. The SUV didn't follow me directly. They didn't have to. They had already sent the message. I knew what happened to people who got too close. I had seen the file. I had heard what Daniel said. And now, I was running out of time. I finally reached my apartment building, checking the street one last time before going inside. It looked empty, but I knew better than to believe that. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, unlocking my door as quickly as I could. Locked it behind me. Then I exhaled. Tried to breathe. Tried to tell myself that I had made it home, that I was safe for now. Then I turned on my phone. 1 new message. No number. No sender. Just 2 words. Last chance. I stared at the screen. Then I did something reckless. I typed back. Who are you? I hit send. No response. I waited. 1 minute. 5. 10. Then my screen flickered. My phone locked itself. When I unlocked it, the message was gone. No record of it. No trace that I had ever received it. My chest tightened. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was control. They weren't just warning me. They were letting me know that I was already too deep. And I had one final choice. Walk away now. Or find out the truth. I already knew which one I would choose. I wasn't done yet. Not until I knew what was really on the 11th floor. And why they were so desperate to hide it. I didn't sleep. I sat in my dark apartment, staring at my phone, replaying the last message over and over in my head. Last chance. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a decision. I could stop. Walk away. Pretend none of this had ever happened. Or I could go back. Find out what they were hiding. Find out why they wanted me to forget. I already knew what I was going to do. I left my apartment just before dawn. If I was going to do this, I needed to do it now, before they expected me to. I took a different route to the hotel. No buses, no cabs, just back alleys and side streets, staying off the grid as much as I could. When I reached the building, the streets were still empty. No black SUV. No one waiting for me. It felt too easy. I stepped inside. The lobby was nearly deserted. A single night staff member behind the desk, scrolling on his phone. He barely looked up. I walked straight past, down the hallway toward the staff entrance I had used 100 times before. My hands were steady. My breath controlled. This time, I wasn't leaving without answers. I pushed through the door into the stairwell. I moved quickly, climbing past the floors I had once worked on. 6, 7, 8. By the time I reached 10, my legs burned. But I kept going. One more flight of stairs. The 11th floor was still there. The blank door. No markings. No security camera. Like the building itself was trying to pretend it didn't exist. I reached for the handle. I already knew it would be unlocked. And it was. I stepped inside. The hallway looked exactly the same as before. Rows of identical, black, unmarked doors stretching into the distance. But something was different now. It felt emptier. Like someone had been here recently. Like something had been cleared out. I walked forward, my footsteps soft against the old carpet. The doors were still locked. All except one. At the very end of the hall. Slightly open. Waiting. I pushed the door open. Inside, the chair was gone. The table was gone. The room was completely empty. No lights. No furniture. No files. No proof that anything had ever been here at all. I stood there, heart hammering, fists clenched at my sides. I was too late. They had erased everything. They had covered their tracks. like none of it had ever existed. And then, a voice behind me. You don't listen, do you? I turned. A man stood in the doorway. Not one of the security guys. Not my old manager. Someone else. Dressed in a dark suit, his face completely unreadable. Like he had been waiting for me. I didn't move. Didn't speak. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Curiosity, he said quietly, can be dangerous. I swallowed hard. Who are you? I forced out. He tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. Then, that doesn't matter. Another step forward. What matters is that you understand what happens next. A pause. Then, in a voice that sent chills down my spine. You're done asking questions. I wanted to fight. Wanted to demand answers. But I knew better. I had pushed too far. They had tolerated me once. Twice. There wouldn't be a third time. And the worst part? They didn't need to threaten me. Because I finally understood. There would be no proof. No records. No way to ever explain what I had seen, because as far as the world was concerned, it never happened. And if I tried to tell anyone, no one would believe me. The man stepped aside, gesturing to the open door. A silent command. Leave. Forget. Pretend this never happened. I stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, I walked past him, back into the hallway, back toward the stairwell, back to reality. By the time I stepped outside the hotel, the sun was rising. The street was quiet. Normal. Like nothing had happened. Like I had never been there. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. Like they had finally let me go. And I should have felt relief. But I didn't. Because as I walked home, my mind kept replaying one question. If they erased everything, what did they do with the people who knew too much? I would never find out. And maybe that was the point. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. And some doors should never be opened. Especially the ones with no numbers.